Hello everyone, this is Dave. Welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for tuning in as always. Hope you had a great Christmas, holiday season, and Happy New Year's to you. Today we're talking about Globalstar stock. This was one that all Rocket Lab investors should be very familiar with because Rocket Lab has a very big contract to build out the satellite buses of Globalstar's next-gen satellite constellation, which they are using to provide emergency communications services to Apple devices. The reason I find Globalstar stock particularly interesting right now is, well, several-fold, but first of all, a ton of space stocks have absolutely run up massively over the past year, looking at Rocket Lab at more of a 5x versus its lows. I love Rocket Lab like pretty much no other stock, and I don't plan to sell, but I do think right now it's looking a little expensive, so it doesn't hurt to look for bargains elsewhere for a little while and wait for the stock to get to levels that I find more attractive. And while a lot of those space stocks have doubled, tripled, quadrupled, etc., Globalstar has not. If we pull up a look at their chart, it's been very flat over the past, 10 plus years. Makes you wonder, is this really a big growth company? Is it really going to break out? Is it going to stay at these levels? Why has it been so flat for so long? What's going on? Well, by the way, if you do end up finding this video useful and informative and you're not already a subscriber, I would very much appreciate it if you hit that subscribe button down below. Every new subscriber helps out so much with the channel, and if you are already a subscriber, well, thank you for continuing to watch. You guys are the best. Okay, with that out of the way, let's dive into Globalstar. Starting off with, just to give you a brief overview of what Globalstar does, there's actually a lot of different aspects to the company. Starting off with, I think you need to talk about spectrum. It's a very important aspect of satellite communications companies and space companies, one that doesn't get focused on enough. Now, Globalstar owns a piece of spectrum called band N53. If you're not too familiar with spectrum, I think the easiest way I can explain it to you is if you think about radio stations when you're in your car, right? So let's say you're listening to station 104.5 and you change over to 99.9, etc., etc. Someone has to control who owns each of these stations, because if different companies start broadcasting at the same frequency, you just get a garbled mess and nobody gets their communications. You're not listening to music, you're just listening to static. By the same token, you're not listening to station 104.5, 104.6, 104.7 because they're too close together and they will cause interference with each other. That's why they're more spread out. Now, Globalstar has the rights to a pretty valuable piece of spectrum, which is this N53 spectrum, exclusive rights in the US for a decade plus, as well as they just got renewed in Mexico, Canada, and a lot of different countries around the world, meaning they have exclusive access to use this spectrum for whatever they decide to use it for. This is an extremely valuable asset, and it's really hard to quantify, but what we want to see from them in the future is starting to monetize this asset and use it to bring in revenues, because it's all very good to say that owning access to this piece of wireless spectrum is extremely valuable, but if it doesn't bring in money to the bottom line, then it's not really helping out the company unless they sell it. So Globalstar is hoping to license this spectrum in various countries around the world, hopefully to telecom, cell companies, mobile network operators. There's a lot of different applications for it. And it is something that's very difficult to acquire. We've seen SpaceX struggle with this previously, and it's why a company like Rocket Lab couldn't just, go build their own satellites right away and launch them and start providing direct-to-cell connectivity, because they don't actually own any spectrum. That's hard to come by. So a company like Rocket Lab would have to partner with someone else who owns spectrum, try to figure out how to acquire spectrum from the FCC, deal with all these different countries and their own licensing regimes for spectrum. It's a very difficult and underappreciated part of the space industry, a big asset for Globalstar that they already have. Next up, we need to talk about Globalstar's XCOM RAN, or Radio Access Network technology. It's a cutting-edge multi-port radio system designed to enhance private wireless networks and is a big growth driver for the future of Globalstar. This multi-point radio system delivers capacity, flexibility, and coverage that outperforms traditional wireless platforms. It can provide over 4 times capacity gains compared to baseline 5G systems in both downlink and uplink transmissions. Globalstar sees this technology as being compelling for a wide range of applications, including industrial automation, allowing devices to communicate with each other in factories and warehouses, stadium streaming services, enterprises, campuses, mining, and extended reality, and more. Its supercell technology allows each radio unit added to the network to increase both coverage and capacity without needing additional spectrum or dealing with challenges such as radio interference and handoff losses when you're switching from one access point to another. It's also designed to be flexible and future-proof, allowing for easy scaling and performance improvements. Additionally, Globalstar does have legacy businesses, including over 260,000 active subscribers, responsible for $44 million in 2023 annual revenue. These subscribers have satellite communications devices, such as old school satellite phones, and they have a strong brand with the outdoor adventure, customer base, and established distribution channels. I do think that this line of business in particular is in a little bit of danger as we see the likes of Apple and various mobile network operators try to bring global satellite connectivity to regular smartphones, meaning you don't need these specialized adventure devices that people want to make sure work out in the mountains and can be used for tracking and stuff like that. Globalstar has also had their technology used in scientific and government applications like ocean buoys for scientific studies, tracking animals, and the like. This is a company with many years of history behind it. It's not a new startup or new space back or anything like that. Despite it being uplisted just fairly recently, it's not a micro-cap company by any means. It has $4 billion in market cap, which is actually a lot more than Rocket Lab had when I did start investing in them. Continuing on with our overview on Globalstar, you can see that the company's design has the spectrum in the middle as the most important, enabling all their different applications. They have that band N53 we talked about, XCOM RAM we talked about, the retail legacy consumer business, as well as Internet of Things devices that can connect to the internet from anywhere, government customers, and wholesale consumers. They only have 340-ish employees, so not a massive company by employee size. Rocket Lab, I believe, is now something like 2,000 plus employees to give you a sense of scale. The FCC did approve an extension of their authorization for the spectrum by 15 years, which is obviously extremely as important, as I was highlighting the spectrum previously, and they acknowledge the essential nature of Globalstar's voice and data communication services, as well as life-saving offerings. So they also did win a 10-year authorization expansion in Mexico. Very annoying having to deal with all these various authorities in various countries, but they're making good progress on kind of getting global rights to this band of spectrum. So this was actually very interesting. The company in a recent investor day said that based on historical transactions, they think that their spectrum alone could be worth between $1 and $4 per share. The US area range of the spectrum, they say between $1 and $2, and then the rest of the world that they have access to worth maybe another $2. So the stock price right now trading about $2 per share. They are saying that this asset they have alone, which is exclusive access to the spectrum that they can license out as they see fit or use as they see fit, is worth potentially double the market cap of the company today, which is obviously very cool, but it's also a little bit of show me the money. Like, I want to see the revenues coming in from this spectrum. Obviously, they're not about to just sell it off because really the whole company does rely on it. And they do say right here that the goal is to generate annual cash flow from spectrum leases that would justify these spectrum values over time in line with comps. Hopefully they'll be able to lease out this spectrum across various countries and companies, bringing in very high margin revenue, because at the end of the day, if you're just leasing access to the spectrum, it doesn't really cost you a whole lot of anything. Of course, they do say that having this exclusivity in the US is more valuable than around the world, but around the world is still valuable as well. They say that spectrum is a perpetual resource that can't be used up. They have demand for it. They have flexibility. It brings in recurring revenue with near 100% margin. As I was saying previously, very high margins margin. So the more revenue they can bring in from this spectrum, a lot of it really flows just to the bottom line. So we'd really want to see that grow in the future, and no build out requirements or restrictions. So this spectrum is really something that they think could be worth a lot in the future. This legacy business, I'm not going to lie, does worry me a little bit. $44 million in revenue in 2023, as I said previously, and they also celebrated 10,000 rescues using this technology. So, I mean, that's nice to hear and having an impact. This almost looks like an old school BlackBerry. But as I said, cell phones are getting more and more satellite connectivity. So once your regular cell phone works out in the mountains, whether that's with Starlink, AST, a Globalstar constellation via Apple or others, then you're not really going to need these devices as much, although there's still maybe some niche use cases for them. But I think this is a business that is under threat. So that is something that you should keep in mind if you're considering investing in Globalstar. This $44 million of revenue could be shrinking in the future as satellite communications to phones goes more mainstream. I do have to say, though, I like companies that aren't afraid of cannibalizing their own products. Reminds me of Apple back in the day, how they basically killed off the iPod and iPod Touch by bringing out the iPhone, but they weren't afraid to do it, and luckily they did, because that iPhone has grown massively and really is the bedrock for the whole company. So companies that aren't afraid to innovate and, disrupt themselves, I do like, and Globalstar is obviously doing that a little bit here, facilitating the Apple direct device communications and emergency SOS services, which kind of used to be their bread and butter for these old school rugged devices. The big deal with Apple is kind of the cornerstone of the company. Now in 2022, they announced this deal with Apple to provide direct handset connectivity, and they've allocated 85% of satellite capacity to support this service. So a lot of their satellite capacity going direct to Apple. This is the current existing constellation. Their next satellites being built, at least the buses being built by Rocket Lab, will be launching in 2025 with service commencing that year. And the future MSS network will expand even further. This is per an 8K filing, and along with it, Apple announced quite a big investment in Globalstar. So nice to see that they do have that big company backing them, and they're unlikely to go out of business. Apple doing a lot of prepayments to make sure that Globalstar will be able to build out this constellation. So they have agreements for service fees of $30 million annually, and that's to be accelerated in their most recent update. And this is actually quite interesting, and we're going to come back to it later on. So in the first annual period following the launch of the expanded satellite services, Globalstar estimates that its total annual revenue is expected to more than double 2024 annualized levels with an improved EBITDA margin. So that's sounding very good. Obviously, if they're going to double their revenues, that's pretty bullish. Going to some of the charts now, I generated a lot of these using FinChat.io, and I do recommend it if you want to give it a try. It's basically bringing all the power of AI to your stock and investing research. You can just type in whatever you want to see. It scours the internet, pulls up charts, pulls up data, does calculations for you, makes charts for you. Very powerful, and I'm liking it more and more these days. So I did get it to pull up a chart of their quarterly revenues, and we can see that it has been growing fairly nicely lately. It was a little bit flatter back before 2020, but I think we're in a nice little growth trend as of late. On the annual basis, you can kind of see it as well. So back in 2022, they were looking at something like $150 million in revenue. Looks like 148. And they are now on a trailing 12-month basis at about $250 million of revenue. So, pretty substantial growth for the company's top line. Just visualizing the quarterly growth rates a different way, so showing that they of late have had, a lot of 20 plus quarter over quarter revenue growth rate quarters, which is nice to see. Annualizing it as well, they have a growth rate in 2023 of over 50%. So that's a really nice growth rate. Generally, if I'm investing in a growth company, anything above 25% could be good depending on other factors as well, including margins, profitability, whether they are already cash flow positive, how much cash they have on the balance sheet, how risky of a company it is. You got to take all these things into account. But at least in 2023, they have grown their top line revenues substantially. And according to that quote about the Apple extended service, they're looking to grow it another 100% very shortly. So I checked out the analyst consensus estimates for revenues over the next several years. This is, of course, via FinChat as well. And the analysts are thinking that 2024, about 250 million. Obviously, that lines up with what we've already seen. 2024 pretty much over at this point, although we haven't had the official Q4 results. 2025, they're looking at a little bit of growth, but not massive. It looks like to me maybe 260-ish. And then we're going up to almost 300 by 2026. So that is what the analysts covering the stock are thinking currently. And if you calculate the compound annual growth rate over the next couple of years, according to the analysts, they are thinking about 9% per year from 2024 to, I can't draw a straight line to save my life, but from 2024 to 2026. Now, bringing it back to this quote here from a previous slide I talked about, Globalstar estimates that its total annual revenue is expected to be more than double 2024 annualized levels, with an improved EBITDA margin following the launch of their expanded satellite services for Apple. To me, that just doesn't jive with these analyst estimates up here, because analysts are saying 2026, they'll be making 300 million. Globalstar is saying, well, as soon as we launch this that year, we're going to double 2024 levels, which is 250, which means it would be going to 500 million. So you can see in the quote here that they're saying they are planning to launch their extended MSS network in 2025 and begin operations in 2025, as we saw previously. So there is quite the discrepancy here, which makes me think where analysts and expectations are wrong, there could be opportunity, because if they are going to deliver $500 million in revenue in, say, 2025, 2026, and the market is expecting maybe 300 million, well, that could lead to some very major beats, which could potentially lead to the stock doing good things if it really does happen. So this really confuses me a bit, because these analysts are supposed to know these things and cover these stocks closely. Is there something I'm missing here, do you think? Is there something the analysts are missing here that we're on top of? Because if that's the case, it could be good things for us. Let me know your thoughts if there's anything I'm missing. But that's why this is one that I think I want to keep following more closely and research further. Just taking a quick look at some of their financial information, the most recent quarterly results we have, which were Q3, they had $51 million of cash on the balance sheet. This has been dropping a little bit as they've been burning capital over the previous quarters, but still a decent amount of cash, although I'd like it to be a little bit higher. I do think that this deal they've made with Apple is going a long way to shore up their balance sheet, get rid of debt, and put them in a better financial position. Looking at the income statement, we can see that they made about $72 million the most recent quarter. The total cost of revenue was only $21 million, which is pretty good in terms of a gross profit number. SG&A also not that high at $18 million. And they actually did book a positive net income here in Q3 of 2024 after being negative for the previous 4 quarters. So that could be a good sign. I do want to look into this quarter more, see if there was some kind of a one-time reason that this happened. Perhaps the deal with Apple, they got some prepayments and stuff like that. Could make it just a one-time quarter that they're positive before they burn a little bit, as they do plan to, build out their next-gen constellation. Dave from the next day here jumping in. Sorry for the wardrobe change, but I did just want to add a little bit of information that I think is valuable, and that is some valuation ratios. Obviously, Globalstar not profitable right now on a trailing 12-month basis, but we can look at the price to sales ratio. As we said, I thought Rocket Labs is looking quite high right now at about 35. Globalstar is actually quite high too, at 18.5. It came in quite a bit higher than I expected, if I'm being honest, considering that they didn't have as crazy a run in 2024 as, say, a Redwire, which had more like a 3x, or Intuitive Machines. Globalstar still trading at a premium to both of those companies, although there could be other reasons for it, like the heritage, the value given to their spectrum assets, and their spreadsheet looking a little bit more safe now after that Apple deal than, say, a Redwire, which has only like 20-something million in the bank, I believe. Globalstar looking at $50+ million, so a little bit safer. Again, not done with all my research. I'd like to build out a full DCF spreadsheet for Globalstar and what they could potentially be worth in the future, but this is something to keep in mind, as well as those other comments talking about how valuable they see their spectrum as being and the growth rates they're looking for in the future. Do remember, if they do actually double their revenue levels in 2025, as they said, that would drop the price to sales down to a 9, which is a bit more reasonable as well. Companies growing very fast, like, say, doubling their revenue, do tend to command higher multiples, so that is something to keep in mind as well. So to wrap up, I'm nowhere near done my research on Globalstar, but I am getting very interested in this company. Let me know down below, are you a shareholder? How long have you held it? What makes you think it's a buy or a sell? Always interested in continuing that conversation. I do have to wonder a little bit about this new world of direct-to-phone connectivity, because Apple, as we know, investing in Globalstar to bring those services to their cell phones, but on the other hand, a lot of mobile network operators like a T-Mobile or whoever are also trying to bring that connectivity via satellite to their networks, and that is redundancy. Like, if you have your iPhone providing you satellite connectivity, but you also have your mobile network operator providing you connectivity via satellite, you don't need both. So how does this shape up in the future? Is this kind of a short-term move for Apple to differentiate their handsets, or is long-term it eventually comes to everybody? That remains to be seen. It'll be a little bit interesting how this shapes up in the future with AST, Starlink, T-Mobile, Sprint, and all these other carriers. It's going to be an interesting new world. Love to hear your thoughts on that down below, because I do think it really is the biggest piece for Globalstar and the company. Obviously, those other things like, Internet of Things and factory automation connectivity are nice, but I think this Apple deal is really the biggest mover for the stock. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you have a great New Year's, and I will see you soon for the next video. Bye for now.